last person executed in the United States for non-homicidal rape, Ronald Lee Wolfe. Sexual homicide is largely referred to as a homicide that is committed with an apparent or underlying sexual motivation. How sex offenders who kill their victims differ from those who do not. The killing of a human being due to the act or omission of another. Included among homicides are murder and manslaughter, but not all homicides are a crime, particularly when there is a lack of criminal intent. Non-criminal homicides include killing in self-defense, a misadventure like a hunting accident or automobile wreck without a violation of law like reckless driving, or legal execution. Ronald Wolfe, born on September 3, 1930. He was brought up in a broken home. His mother ran away and abandoned him when Ronald Lee Wolfe was 2 weeks old, and his father also ran out of the house and disappeared when he was 6 years old. Ronald Lee Wolfe, abandoned by both parents, became the responsibility of his grandparents. He lived with his grandparents in his earlier years. The crime that brought Ronald Lee Wolfe to Missouri death row was, he was convicted of brutal attack of an 8-year-old girl on October 18, 1959, near Troy, Missouri, just 3 days after his release from the federal penitentiary in Georgia for a car theft charge. Wolfe lured the girl away from a carnival with a candy bar. That the 8-year-old girl named in the information filed against Wolfe had been raped was established by the uncontradicted medical evidence. There was no eyewitness to the commission of the crime, but the circumstantial evidence was such as to leave no substantial doubt that Wolfe was the perpetrator. When he was captured in Hannibal, Missouri, in the early hours of the day following that on which the crime was committed, there was blood on his trousers and on his shorts, and blood on the seat of the stolen car which he had been driving when he picked up the child in Troy, and which he drove after leaving her and while trying to make his escape. He later accompanied officers to the place where the alleged offense was committed, and there identified a bloody shirt he had given the child to wipe herself with and had left by the roadside. The evidence was such as to have warranted the jury in finding the salient facts to be that about 7:30 in the evening, on the evening in question, defendant, by using a candy bar, lured the child into the car he was driving, and away from the Sacred Heart Church's Fall Festival in Troy, which she was attending with her parents and 3 sisters and a brother. He drove her some 3 miles into the country where he parked the car, and admittedly made repeated, unsuccessful attempts to ravish the child, and otherwise had shocking relations with her. The car was thereafter parked within about 100 feet of a farmhouse, one of the occupants of which, at about 8:30 p.m., heard the car's motor idling, and looked out the window where in the darkness she discerned an object moving away from the automobile and toward the house. Upon investigation, this was found to be the prosecutrix, who was taken into the home, and forthwith returned to her family at the church picnic in Troy. She was taken to a hospital at once and examined, and her condition as described by the examining physician was such as to dispel any doubt of the fact that there had been penetration and extensive damage to the affected part by tearing. According to the arresting officers, immediately upon Ronald Lee Wolfe being taken into the police station, his clothing and belongings were taken from his body for a further search. Nothing in the way of narcotics was found. The clothing was returned after the search. The evidence further reveals that the State Highway Patrol, the FBI and the officers from Decatur, where the automobile had been stolen, were notified. The State Highway Patrolman, who first viewed Ronald Lee Wolfe at the jail at Hannibal, observed blood on his pants, and asked him where it came from. His answer was that he had had intercourse the night before with a prostitute. Sometime around 9 o'clock in the morning, Ronald Lee Wolfe was interviewed by the local agents of the FBI, This interview was confined exclusively to the theft and transportation of cars, not only the one which he had in his possession at the time of the arrest, but others that had been stolen along the way. He gave a statement of these activities to the agent. The questioning by the agent was confined to questions involving a violation of federal laws. Prior to the interview by the FBI, Ronald Lee Wolfe remained in his cell, and, according to his testimony, took no further narcotics. He says that during this period of time, he was sick, had been vomiting, suffered from diarrhea, was jerky. In other words, he fully and accurately described the symptoms that would follow withdrawal of the use of narcotics from a narcotic addict. After his interview with the FBI, Ronald Lee Wolfe's fingerprints were taken, and, according to his own testimony, he went back to the lavatory for the purpose of washing his hands. He says he needed a fix by that time, and that he took 1 4-grain morphine and a piece of Benzedrine. Shortly thereafter he was brought back into the chief's office, and the sheriff and deputy sheriff of Lincoln County, the county in which the crime had been committed, began their questioning of him. On February 12, 1960, it was determined that the facilities of Pike County Jail were inadequate to safely secure Ronald Lee Wolfe. He was ordered transferred to the county jail in Montgomery County, there to be held and confined until the further order of the court. The trial took place on February 29, 1960, before the Honorable James D. Clemens. Following the trial of approximately 1 day, Ronald Lee Wolfe was found guilty, as heretofore stated. He sought unsuccessfully to set aside the judgment and conviction in the state court before filing his petition for writ of habeas corpus on June 1, 1960, in the Supreme Court of Missouri. That petition was filed by his present counsel, and it is in almost the exact language as the petition now before this court. His petition was denied by the Supreme Court on June 6, 1960, without a hearing. It is argued that the trial of Wolfe in the Circuit Court of Pike County, Missouri, was so unfair as to be violative of the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment of the Constitution of the United States, for the following reasons. The voir dire examination of the veneer of prospective jurors from which the trial jurors to try Wolfe were to be selected was inadequate to insulate him from the hostility engendered by much adverse publicity. The conviction was obtained by the state through the use of an involuntary confession. The state on the trial of Wolfe over-accentuated his criminal record, and he was denied the effective assistance of counsel. It is also argued that the order appealed from should be reversed because of erroneous rulings made by Judge Duncan in the hearing conducted by him in refusing to compel the attendance of state court jurors who tried Wolfe, in excluding evidence of a witness relative to the state of mind of the people of the community where and when the trial took place, and in denying a continuance until a witness who refused to testify at the hearing on the ground of self-incrimination would change his mind and testify. The question of the alleged inadequacy of the voir dire examination of prospective jurors at the trial of Wolfe was raised in his direct appeal from his conviction, and was considered and overruled by the Supreme Court of Missouri in State of Missouri v. Wolfe. On May 8, 1964, 33-year-old Ronald Lee Wolfe was executed in Missouri State Penitentiary, Jefferson City, Missouri, in the gas chamber. Thank you for watching Death Row.